I am excited to be talking with you today about performance-adjacent learning, a new frontier for L&D. By way of brief introduction, my name is Karen Hebert-Maccaro, and I am currently Chief Content Officer at O'Reilly Media. O'Reilly's been in existence for 40 years, founded by Tim O'Reilly, who's been associated with some of the biggest movements in the technological spaces, such as OSCON, or open source software, the Maker movement, the Web 2.0 movement, and the like. You may know O'Reilly from our fairly well-known books with the woodcut animals on the cover. It's kind of iconic. Or you may know us from our learning platform called Safari, which has over 2 million users today, and has been part of the O'Reilly learning experience for several years now. My background is as a Chief Learning Officer and a Head of Talent Development in the biotechnology and the healthcare technology industries. And even prior to that, I was a professor and a dean in business schools. Here at O'Reilly, I am passionate about the notion of developing better ways for professionals to learn and to learn while they work. And I'm excited to share with you this notion of performance adjacency because I think it truly is something that we should all be paying some attention to as we build our learning strategies and our learning ecosystems. I'd like you to just ask yourself a question. And the question is quite simple. If you were to think of the primary mode of learning that's happening inside your organization today, what would you say it was? I'm willing to bet that many of you think that the primary mode of learning is either e-modules, some form of e-learning, or perhaps even instructor-led training. And there's real merit to both of those methods of learning for sure. But I would also ask you to think about whether or not that is the best primary mode of delivery inside your organization, and whether or not there are things that maybe you or others inside your organization are missing as a result of not exploring other ways of delivering and encouraging learning behavior inside your company. I'd like to start talking about performance adjacency by talking to you a little bit about a story that I heard early on in my tenure at O'Reilly. I was talking with a group of sales folks who was telling me a story about a meeting that they had with one of our large banking and financial industry customers. It was renewal time, and any of you who've ever worked in sales know that renewal conversations often are filled with questions and interests about what's coming next at the company and maybe even price negotiations. And in this instance, it was striking to the salespeople because the customer said, "Where do I sign?" before the sales team even had a chance to engage them fully. And they didn't want to look that gift horse in the mouth for sure, but they were curious, and so they asked the question, so why so eager to sign? And the story that they got in response is a really great example of performance adjacency. They were told that they had recently implemented a chip and pin system at the point of sale, and that this particular chip and pin system went down. And the estimation was that it was costing them about $150,000 an hour, every hour that the system was not operational. It was one of their engineers who went into Safari, our learning platform, and found the specific answer to the problem with the chip and pin system, implemented it, and they saved what they estimated to be about $500,000 as a result of that 10-minute jump in and jump out of our learning platform. And so as a result, they were more than willing to sign the renewal contract. So this story is very relevant to this notion of performance adjacency. And we'll talk a little bit more about what performance adjacency is and how to encourage it over the course of the next couple of minutes. The challenge as I see it is that we have to recognize in learning and development that there are two types of learning experiences and both are relevant. The first is the learner who's new and needs to learn something for the first time, and then there's the learner who is more advanced and has more to build around him or her as they try to further their knowledge. And I think if we think about it that way, we've got a different set of needs for each of those learners. So let's talk about that a little bit in depth. This is the Professional Skills Development Framework. It's a framework that was built off of research that O'Reilly did. And when we looked at the way learners were learning inside our platform, we found something kind of interesting. We created a proficiency scale marked by 3 levels of proficiency, starting with identification, which is when you're early on in a topic or a concept and you're really just trying to define it. What is AI, for example? What is Agile? Then you move to awareness, which is where you start to contextualize the learning or the concept. You start to see it as it relates to other things. Oh, Agile is a project management methodology. How is it used beyond software development? That kind of process. And then finally, when you get to fluency, you are trying to apply skills from that particular topic or concept, and you are trying to make use of the learning for application. So in this case, you might think of, okay, now I'm going to be part of an Agile team and I'm going to be a Scrum Master. Well, I now have to understand what it means to be a Scrum Master. And what we found when we looked at the way people progress through these learning stages is that they reach a point, and we're not exactly sure where that point is, but it's probably somewhere between the identification and the awareness stages, where they become structurally literate in the topic or the concept. And this point was an incredibly important point because prior to that, learners wanted a lot of structure. They wanted to be served up a learning experience that would take them from A to B and then to C and so on. They didn't want a ton of content because they really were just trying to have the basics. After the point of structural literacy, learning behavior shifted. Learners wanted access to a lot of content with very little structure because your situation is different from my situation. And they were contextualizing and building fluency in areas that were specific to the problems they were trying to solve. They didn't want to be spoon-fed in a linear fashion. They wanted to be put into a body of knowledge and given free rein to essentially use it as they saw fit. And this became a very important concept as we built our learning products, but also as we began to better understand the way learning happens inside organizations today. We did more research and found lots of things, but one of the things that we found that was of particular interest is this notion of 5 moments of learning need. And the 5 moments are new learning, more learning, apply, solve, and change. And the first 2 line nicely with the identification stage in our model. We think in the first 2, more structure is probably a good thing, less content. People don't want to be overwhelmed, they're just getting their feet under them. But for the remaining 3, apply, solve, and change, people do want more content and less structure. They want to be able to direct their own learning, which is not a new concept in adult learning for sure, but certainly powerful when you think about it in terms of what we found. We are sure that performance support, something you may be aware of, is an effective way of delivering some on-the-job learning experiences in a less formal way. If you have a call center, for example, you may have a computer program embedded in their workflow so that when they're on the phone with a prospect or a current customer and they face a problem, there might be a pop-up that shows them the best solutions or the most common solutions to the problem that they're facing. That's performance support, and performance support is incredibly valuable. However, performance support has to be customized to individual workflows. The other concept around performance support, or the modified version of performance support, is performance adjacency. In performance adjacency, you can have a tool that is not specific to one workflow, but rather is accessible with a very easy and minimally difficult manner so that people who are working can jump out of their workflow into the tool or into the learning experience, get an answer really quickly, and then go back to their workflow, solve a problem, just like the example I gave you at the start of this presentation. Performance adjacency does not have to be specific for every workflow. One tool or one learning product or one learning ecosystem that you build could work for any number of workflows across your entire organization. So it has some benefit over straight performance support embedded in a specific workflow. When we looked at our learning product, Safari, we looked at 1 quarter's worth of data, the 3rd quarter of 2017, about 190,000 individual learning events. We found that 42% of the time, the learners were engaging in those quick moments. You know, they were on the platform for 10 minutes. They jumped on, they jumped off, they jumped back on. We found that the remaining set of the time, People were engaging in more linear ways. They were starting at the beginning of a learning experience or a learning path, and they were going multiple ways into that learning path, more A, B, C in order and sequential. Now, it's not quite 50-50, but 42% of the time, with 190,000 learning events as the sample size, got us really thinking about not just the anecdotal stories we'd heard about people using our platform in a way that was performance adjacent, but got us thinking about the fact that roughly half or almost half of the time our users might be preferring to learn in the moment, at the point of need, when they're in the workflow, and when they're trying to solve a problem, get an answer, generate a new idea, and so on. I believe the learning landscape has already changed. We've got the introduction of virtual reality and augmented reality en masse now. It's helping us and our learners look at the world through a learning lens. We've got voice-enabled technologies most of the time on our kitchen counter, or even perhaps in our offices, where we can ask Alexa or Google Home or whatever it is to order things for us. I see a day very near in the future where we can actually engage with our learning tools in a very similar fashion, where we might be able to not even take our eyes off the workflow. And if the tool that we've built or bought enables it, simply ask a question. What is artificial intelligence? And get an answer from a trusted source. That is true performance adjacent learning in the moment, at the point of need. And I think we as L&D professionals need to focus more on providing experiences that are well-rounded. Linear, structured, course experiences, and performance-adjacent learning experiences that enable the learner to do both, because both are critical to the development of a robust learning ecosystem and a competitive workforce. So 3 things to remember. 1, be in the know. As you think about buying or building learning experiences and learning products for your organization, think about the fact that could be upwards of half the time learners prefer to learn at a point of need, in the moment, and in a performance-adjacent way. That way you can select or build to that type of learning behavior. 2, critical to the ability to have a performance-adjacent or performance support type of learning tool is search. If you're going to jump out of a workflow and try to get an answer quickly, you need a very precise search functionality. So when you build or buy, look for search that is supported by AI, that includes natural language processing, and allows the user to get a very precise answer to a question without having to sort through irrelevant returns on their search functions. 3rd and finally, explore new user interfaces to increase the likelihood that learning can happen in the moment and in a performance-adjacent way. Whether that be voice or augmented reality, look for ways that the learner can work and learn simultaneously so that they can marry those 2 things together for the purpose of the growth and development of them as an individual, and also the competitiveness and the success of the company or organization as a whole. I hope you enjoyed a brief talk on performance-adjacent learning and why I think it's so important to the future of L&D. Thanks for listening.